All right, we are live. We have everything working. So I'm just back from running my morning errands, and I thought I'd sit down and have a cup of coffee. And while I was doing that, have a little chat with you people. Yesterday, I casually mentioned that I took a little bit of time to cancel a bunch of my YouTube subscriptions. And since I don't really subscribe to any other forms of social media or newsletters or anything, that kind of cuts me off from a lot of information. And that was a deliberate choice to do that. I'm not the only person going offline. There's a lot of intellectuals who are actually going offline. Um, it's a personal choice. I mean, how much nonsense can you stomach, right? That's what it is. How much mental pollution can you tolerate? Because that's what you're really dealing with. So I spent a lot of time defending my brain space, my thought space, my intellectual integrity, and so I tend to avoid a lot of pollution from social media. And but that's not why I got off of YouTube. Let me explain why I got off of why I pared down my exposure to YouTube influencers, and it was they were all good people, right? So some of that was hard to do, but I really did it. And why I did that, okay? I did that because I'm done. I'm done. What am I done with? So there's a phase in a disaster where, you've heard of the stages of grief, right? Where there's these 5 stages, and everyone goes through the 5 stages, and finally at the end, you hit the stage called acceptance. And whether the thing that put you in that pipeline was, you've been diagnosed with cancer, or you just lost a loved one, or you lost an important pet, or you become isolated from your community, or whatever the loss was, the shock to your system was. You go through all these stages, denial, argument, anger, and finally you get to acceptance. So with regards to climate change, which is really global heating, okay, I got into this pipeline about 15 years ago, and really more like 30, but with increasing intensity of interest, and I would say I would be intensely interested in this for about the last 15 years. And reading the papers and looking at the charts and following the headlines and following the IPCC reports and dealing with the cops and dealing with all the influencers, and my pathway through this is probably the same as everyone else's. You discover there's a problem. Either someone brings it to your attention, or you kind of confront it. It's right there. What's that? Okay. And then there's a period of basically denial, right? That can't be right. And you go about your business, and then you get hit with it again. Wait, is that the same thing? Did that just happen again? Wait, maybe this is serious, right? And then you become sort of aroused, like now you're starting to pay attention. But when something comes up in front of you and you're not really sure if it's legit, and you don't understand it, you walk around it. But if you walk around it a couple of times, then your brain flips into another gear. This is pattern recognition. This is what humans do. Some humans much better than others, by the way, but all of us can do this to some extent. At some point, you just stop walking around it, and you look at it. Okay, now it has your attention. It did not have your attention before. You were not engaged. I made a big deal about this in my last video, right? You were not engaged enough to even care one way or the other. But now it has your attention. That's called engagement. Now you're looking at it saying, what is this? Is this for real? And you might ask someone else who's with you. You might go and talk to an authority. You might read something. You might go online and do a search, but you're engaged now, and you're looking, okay? And then as you very soon, your engagement either becomes frustrating and complicated, and you don't really understand it, and it makes you feel stupid, and then you walk away, right? That happens to a lot of people. And I want to be very careful. You're not stupid just because you feel stupid. You're ignorant. And that's why we have education. That's why we have doctors, and that's why we have professors, and that's why we have science, right? You're not expected to know everything, but it doesn't make you stupid. It makes you ignorant. And that's not a bad thing. And you could even admit to yourself, I just don't know anything about this topic. I'm really ignorant on this topic. And that could either offend you and you could walk away. Okay, that's one branch you could take. Or you could say, I am ignorant on this topic, therefore I will investigate. So you go from being unengaged to being uh, uh, partially engaged to then maybe walking away, or you become actively engaged. So you're learning, you're looking, you're discussing it with people. And then at some point in this process, this is mostly global heating I'm talking about now, but in any complicated uh, problem that we're having to face, you become aware enough of the reality. Okay, not just your perception. Like, what's that? I don't really know what that is. Too. Okay, I get it. I understand it. Now I understand. It took me a while. I wasn't sure. It was complicated, but I kept at it. Now I understand. Okay, you get to a point where you're understanding, and then if it really is as bad as it looked, I mean, that's why you stopped to look in the first place, right? You're like, what is this? I mean, if it was nothing, you'd say, oh, well, that's nothing. You'd move on, right? But it looks like it's something that needs your attention. That's why you got into this process funnel because, this could be a problem. Wait, that's what they're saying? Wait, is that true? Who's saying that? I'm looking at this now, okay? And then at some point, you enter, and this takes a long time. At some point, you enter another phase in your progression where, as regards to like global heating, or as regards to the Titanic hitting an iceberg, either one works. The same stuff applies to everything. And I'll get to the Titanic in a minute. You become alarmed. You can't get too deeply into an understanding of what we're doing to this planet, to the Earth dynamic system. You can't get too deep into it without becoming alarmed. Now, you may not be alarmed like, oh my God, the sky is falling. You may not be alarmed like I've got to go move into the hills with my dog and my shotgun. You may not be that kind of alarmed, all right? But you could become intellectually alarmed. You could start thinking thoughts like, how is this not a broader topic of discussion? How is it that our so-called leaders aren't addressing this? This is alarming. Am I stupid? Am I just wrong about this? Why are all these other people saying that this is a problem, and they seem to have good credentials to understand what's a problem and what isn't in this field? And they're alarmed, and I'm alarmed now. I've seen what they've seen. I kind of understand it, and I'm alarmed. They're alarmed. I'm alarmed, and we're the only ones, the scientists and me, just Joe Sixpack, Joe Schmo. I'm alarmed now, and the scientists are alarmed. And if I'm alarmed, it must be kind of alarming, right? So why isn't anyone else alarmed? And so you go into this confusion, like you're feeling like you're separating from the group, right? There's this larger group of people, your neighbors, your family members, right, who are like, don't worry about it. And yet you and the scientists that you've been studying for a couple months or a couple of years, reading their work and understanding their concerns and looking at their presentations and listening to the words, and you're becoming alarmed, but no one around you is. And so now what's really happening is you're pulling away from the crowd because this is alarming to you, and it's not alarming to them. Now this can really break up a lot of families. So there's a huge impetus to not do that, to not be the monkey that pulls away from the troop, because the lone monkey is a dead monkey, right? You have your security group, you have your family group, you have your community group, you have your church group, whatever it is, or all of those things, right? And if you start pulling away because suddenly you're on a different life path because you're alarmed about something, and you're feeling like they're not alarmed, and either you're wrong and you're the only one in the group who's feeling this way, so maybe you are wrong. And if you're wrong, that means that all of science is wrong, and that's a little hard to swallow for some people. Or you're not wrong, and these people you're with are just, what's their excuse? How can they not be alarmed by this? So maybe you stop there. Again, you walk away from it, or you keep going. You keep going. At some point, because it's alarming, you start feeling like you have to take action. There is one more step beyond all of this, of ignoring it, engaging with it enough to learn something, learning enough to become alarmed, becoming alarmed enough to try to take action, to dissipate your sense of anxiety. And at the end of all this is you end up being in the same place. If it's the Kubler-Ross process, and this, it's acceptance. You just accept it. Now, the thing about acceptance is you don't need anyone else to accept it, right? That's a personal thing. You've seen the truth as well as any of us can understand it. It's the Earth dynamic system. It's very complicated. So, okay, there's room for error in here, but you've seen enough, and enough people who know more about it than you do have seen plenty to be alarmed. And so, yep, it's rubbing off. You're getting alarmed, and at some point, you just have to accept. There is no correction. No one's offering a solution. You're just alarmed, and you have to accept that. And what do you have to do? What do you do at that point? You might not do anything. Now, the same thing applies. I'm at the point of acceptance. And let me tell you how I got there. But I'm not going to use climate change and global heating as the example because that's a bit too remote for people. I'm going to use the Titanic. This was my go-to example. For some reason, it just works for everything, okay? Everything. There are people aboard the Titanic who are engineers. It might even be some of the engineers who built the Titanic, right? They're going on the maiden voyage. Some of them are paid to be there. In case something goes wrong, they're going to fix it. Spring a leak in a pipe, or an electrical system fails, or a breaker gets blown, or a fuse or something. And there's engineers on the Titanic who probably helped build the Titanic, and they're there. They're paid to be there, and they're going to fix things if they break on the maiden voyage because, hey, that's when they're going to break, right? It's on the maiden voyage. We haven't had this thing out to sea yet, so now we're going to have to out to sea, and now things are going to break. All right, fine. Here I am. Got my tool bag. I got my stuff. I got my schematics. Let's go. Some of the people are on the Titanic who are engineers who built the Titanic just because it's an honor. You built this thing, and it's an honor. You've been invited by the ship owner to go on the maiden voyage. It's going to be a famous voyage of this mighty ship that you helped build. So you're going to go on this maiden voyage, and you're just going to go. And some engineers, scientists are on the Titanic because they just need to go to New York. Have nothing to do with the ship. They just need to go to New York. So here's a bunch of people on the Titanic. They're supposed to be there. They want to be there. They just happen to be there. And they're all going to New York on this maiden voyage of the Titanic. It hits the iceberg. It hits the iceberg. Most people are not scientists. They're not engineers. They're not mathematicians. They're not physicists. They don't really care that it hit the iceberg. They're like, well, they're going to fix it, right? They're going to fix it. Now, people like me, who are engineers and are scientists, we kind of know what happened. We want to know what happened. We start digging into the data. We start digging into it. We're curious. That's just our personality flaw. We're just curious about everything that goes on around us, right? We're no good at parties because we're constantly analyzing what's in the punch bowl. So here we are. We're on the Titanic. The ship has come to a stop. There's an iceberg a little bit off the stern, and we think, ooh, we must have hit an iceberg. That's not good. And you're thinking, that's not good. You've got enough engagement to know that that's not good. It might not be bad, but it's definitely not good. So maybe you start asking questions. Maybe you see the crew running up and down the decks, right? And they're dragging hoses and they're dragging pumps, and they're sometimes they're just running to one way and turn around and running back. Okay, they're just hair on fire moments. So they're doing all this, and you catch one of them. And you say, "So how bad is it?" And one person tells you they don't know, and another person tells you, "Well, we have a big crack and water's coming in," and a third person tells you, "Yeah, there's water coming in, but the pumps aren't working." And the fourth person tells you there's water coming in, and it's a lot of water. And now you think, and as you collect information, you're thinking, wow, this sounds really bad. I mean, not everybody I talk to thinks it's really bad, but the consensus that I'm getting from talking to all these people is that it's really bad. This is really bad. Wow. Okay. So you're collecting more information. How much water is coming? You can do the math in your head, right? You're an engineer. You're a scientist. You can do this kind of stuff. So how much water is coming in? How much water can the pumps make to pump it out? And how many pumps do we have? And they're all working. And you're just asking some simple questions, and you're trying to assess the problem. And hey, you're an engineer, so maybe you could even help, right? And yes, that's what you're telling them. Hey, I'm an engineer. I helped build this ship. Maybe I can help. So you get more information. Yeah, this is where the water's coming in. It's filling these two compartments. The bulkheads aren't holding it back. Things are buckling. The ship is starting to settle. The rate of settling is this amount, this many inches per minute. And of course, you ask about, well, this ship is supposed to be unsinkable, right? And pretty soon you overhear, yeah, it looks like the ship is going down. Why is the ship going down? You start asking questions about that. Why is the ship going down? How's that possible? It says right here on the ticket, unsinkable. I got my first class ticket right here in front of me. Look at this. It says it's unsinkable. Unsinkable Titanic. What do you mean the ship is going down? So you get these, you gather all this information, and at some point, it hits you. You're a scientist, you're an engineer, you gravitate to knowledge, you gravitate to asking questions. You just want to know. Yeah, that's how your brain works. You want to know what's in the punch bowl. It's stupid, right? But you want to know. You just ask a lot of questions. Some of them sound dumb, but to you, you're gathering data, you're gathering information. So that's how we work. That's why we're scientists. That's why we're engineers. That's how we got into this, okay? We're those people. We're those people. At some point, it hits you. This ship is going down. Even though it says on the ticket it's unsinkable, according to the data, this ship is going down. And at that point, and this is important, this is the whole point of this video. This is the whole point of that discussion. This is the entire point of everything. Everything I'm doing on YouTube, everything I will ever do on YouTube is this. There's a point where you know enough and you don't need to know anymore. And as regards global heating and climate change, I am at a point where I know enough. I just do. That's my job. I collect data. I analyze data. I connect the dots. That's what I do. I find the patterns. I find them faster than anybody else. I've been knowing for years this is a shit show. This is a dumpster fire. And now other leading voices are saying the same thing. They're saying, yeah, this is a dumpster fire. This is officially a dumpster fire. We are officially in a dumpster fire. All right. And yeah, I knew that about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I was starting to disengage. I was like, man, this doesn't look good. I'm standing on the deck of the Titanic, and I can feel it changing by the minute. I just feel it. I'm thinking, fuck it. We're done. And at that point, you stop asking questions. You just do. I know you can't imagine that. You just have to know every tiny detail. What's going to happen? Where's it going to go? What's it going to do to me? What's it going to do to me personally? And when's it going to do it? And you just keep asking these questions. But somebody like me, an engineer, a scientist, we don't ask questions to be annoying. We ask questions to get data. And when the data is sufficient to point to an outcome, to point to a resolution, we have all that data. We asked all the critical questions, and some questions required other questions, and some data required additional data. And so we get the questions and all the data, and it all points to this thing down the road. And then we know. That's how science works. Okay, I got it. That's what's happening. This is what's happening now. Okay, I got it. This is what's happening. Got the picture, got the data. All right. Now, if you're on the actual Titanic, that's the point where you start edging away from the crowd. You don't look over the edge of the railing, watching the water come in or being pumped out. You just kind of edge away from the crowd, and you very casually go looking for a lifeboat. You just don't need to know anymore. You can see it. The ship's going down. I can feel it. I can feel the deck tilting as I'm standing here. It's not me, it's the deck. I can feel it tilting. This sucker's going down. Then we may have 60 minutes. We may have 15 minutes. It could go down the next 30 seconds. It's going down. I can feel it. Something's going to happen. This ship could break in half. It could just lift enough and just break in half, and the whole thing sink in 15 seconds. So, excuse me, I'll just be edging towards the lifeboats. Thank you very much. And several times on these videos, for a while there, I was doing it pretty regularly. My advice was get to the lifeboats. Get to the lifeboats. And most people just don't understand why that's necessary. Now, if you're the captain on the Titanic, that's kind of your job, is to tell people when to get to the lifeboats. The captain on the Titanic is supposed to make that call. The ship is sinking. I don't like it. It's embarrassing to me personally. In fact, personally, I'm probably going to go down with the ship because that's kind of my job. Okay, so I'm going to die. I'm the captain. I have to go down with the ship, and I have to make sure everyone else gets off the ship before I get off. And oh, by the way, we don't have enough lifeboats. That's another thing I know because I'm the captain. All right. So I know we're not going to get everyone off this ship. And therefore, I know I am not going to get off this ship. And therefore, I'm going down with the ship. And I have to get as many people off this ship as I can. That's my job as the captain. That's my job. That's my only job right now. My job is not to save myself. My job is to get everyone off the ship that I can. So the captain can make that call. The captain can get on the tannoy system and tell all the passengers, okay, we're going to abandon the ship. This is the protocol. Women and children first, whatever. Okay, passengers before crew, um, children before adults, and afterwards we're going to try and jerry rig some life flotation devices out of chairs and tables and anything else we can lay our hands on, and we'll come up with solutions. But right now, let's start moving people to the lifeboats. And I kind of assume that happened on the Titanic. I know they had a lot of problems laying out the lifeboats. It suggests to me they waited too long. But hey, it's a judgment call, right? And it said right on the ticket, unsinkable. So your judgment's going to be, somewhat colored by that, correct? I've been following this topic of global heating. Some people call it climate change. Climate change is the least of your problems, okay? You'd be lucky if that's all you got. A little bit of climate change, you could probably handle that. The global heating, nah, that's going to murder you. So the global heating is complicated. I've been following it a long time, and I have been progressively detaching from the topic. Not because I think it's dumb or it's a hoax or it's not worth my time. It's because I've seen enough. I've seen enough. And we are finished. We're finished. Now okay, let me be very clear here. The part of we that is finished, and the reason for this video is to explain exactly what it is that's finished. We are doomed. Okay. Why? Because global heating is a phenomenon of physics. It is caused by enhancements to the greenhouse effect, which is a feature of the Earth's atmosphere. The greenhouse effect is caused by the presence in the atmosphere of long duration atmospheric components such as carbon dioxide, which is a gas. There's natural carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. A good part of it comes from volcanoes, at least historically. And carbon dioxide is used by plants. It's also returned to the atmosphere by plants. So that's what we call the carbon cycle. So carbon dioxide is simply used and then returned. All right. That's why there's always a certain amount of it in the atmosphere. Plants use it and then they return it. And they use it again and they return it again. It's recycled. Okay. It's recycled. Carbon dioxide is recycled. We have been throwing the greenhouse effect, the natural greenhouse effect, out of kilter by adding CO2 to the atmosphere. Adding more than can be removed. And that's key. We are doing that. We do that by burning fossil fuels. And we burn fossil fuels by digging them out of the ground. And that's why, I have, the 5 little words, the solution to the greenhouse effect enhancements, the solution to global heating, the solution to having excess CO2 in the atmosphere. The solution is leave it in the ground. Okay, that's the solution. Leave the oil in the ground. Leave the natural gas in the ground. Leave the coal in the ground. Leave it in the ground. That's the solution. And you can say, well, there's something else. And you could say there's unicorns. And you can say that there's innovation. And you can say there's technology. And you could say we're very smart. We can figure this out. Well, no. And I keep seeing papers coming out now that are saying, no, you can't. And again, it's not because we're not putting enough money into it. And it's not because we're not smart enough. It's because you can't. And why can't you? How can I just say that? How can other people just say that this is a pipe dream? This is a fever dream. You've been smoking, and you can't do that. And the reason is because of thermodynamics. That's it. You don't have enough energy to reverse this process. Oh, but no, you can't. But you don't know that. Yes, I do. You should see the analyses. Just to remove 1 year's worth of carbon dioxide emissions, not even the past decades of emissions, just 1 year's worth, requires a quarter of the Earth's land surface planted in trees that immediately become mature. Because it takes a long time for those trees, when planted, to actually absorb the carbon dioxide that you're claiming you're going to absorb. And so after 4 years of planting all the Earth's available land surface, You've removed 4 years, and then you're done, because now you've done the thing. You've planted all the trees. They all miraculously grew to maturity, and now you've removed 4 years of just annual CO2 emissions through the combustion of fossil fuels. And that's the part you can do that doesn't violate the laws of thermodynamics. That's the thing you can do. Now, never mind that those trees are actually part of a carbon cycle. It's just that if you took structures that are not carbon bearing, like city centers and airports and freeways, and you tore up the asphalt, you tore up the concrete, and you got to the dirt, and you planted trees there that were not there before, okay? Then you could have all this carbon pulled down into the tree tissues. Of course, it takes 40 years, but let's pretend that it doesn't. Let's pretend the trees are planted and they immediately mature, which is not what happens. So again, you're violating laws of physics here, but let's just pretend. Then you can, a quarter of the Earth's surface, the arable land, we're not counting the oceans, a quarter of the Earth's surface you could plant with trees. And that would be 1 year. So in 4 years, you've covered the entire planet Earth with trees, and now you're done doing that. And that doesn't remove past carbon emissions. And after 4 years, it doesn't remove future carbon emissions. That's it. You're done. Anything else violates the laws of thermodynamics. And planting trees is only part of the carbon cycle. And you only get 4 years worth if you plant the entirety of all the arable land on Earth. And then, of course, the problem with all these examples is, well, then where are you growing the food? Are you growing the food in the oceans? Because you can't plant the trees in the ocean. So are you going to move food production to the oceans? Are you going to move the food productions to space? Where's your food going to grow? You just used all the land to plant trees so that the oil companies could continue selling oil for 4 years, because that's your only narrative. The next 4 years, we're planting trees over the 100% of the Earth's arable land so that we can feel good about 4 years worth of emissions. And after that, you're kind of out of luck. Of course, before then, you start to starve because you've just taken all the land you could find and you planted trees on it to save yourself from 4 years of global heating. And after that, you've got to come up with something else. So at some point, you have to just admit, when you've gone down every avenue and you've read the papers and you've heard the arguments and you've seen the rebuttals and you've kind of put it all together and you've got the whole problems and solution space in your head. You've layered all the problems and all the solutions, and then you've looked up, and as you get more and more confused, this just doesn't seem to be working. Then you look up in the dictionary, in the Wikipedia, wicked problem. You look up wicked problem. And then you hear from me, oh yeah, we've been in a wicked problem for probably 60 years. No solution. It's a problem. You can still call, but it does not imply there's a solution. It's a wicked problem. It's a class of problems that have no solution. That can't be true. Oh yes, that can definitely be true. That happens all the time. In fact, you're in the middle of one. You're in the middle of a wicked problem. At some point, you just say, okay, acceptance. I've gone through all the stages. I did the avoidance. I did the research. I did the learning. I had the arguments. I filled my head with facts, figures, and I let it all play out in my brain. And I did all the calculations that my brain can do. And at the end, I come to so we're basically screwed. Okay. Acceptance. We're basically screwed. Wow. Wow. Now what? Okay, well, now what is nothing. That's what happens. When you're in a wicked problem, when you're in a problem with no solution, the solution set is either really small or it's really large, but it doesn't matter because none of the solutions are actually solutions. In fact, if you follow them all down, and if you're in the middle of a wicked problem and you're following all the solutions to their logical conclusions, it commonly happens. You come right back where you started. And in this case, in order to implement most of the solutions that would solve global heating by removing CO2 from the atmosphere, capturing CO2 at the smokestack, most of those solutions require, wait for it, fossil fuels. And so you're burning fossil fuels to solve the problem that you created by burning fossil fuels. And when you realize that, when you finally come around to that, you're like, oh, right, I get it. Now I understand why people are wetting the bed. Yeah, I get it now. I get it now. Okay, fine. Took me all this time to figure this out for myself, but fine. I get it. Okay, acceptance. And I'm at the point of acceptance. You should be too. That would be my recommendation. You need to be at the point of acceptance, because this is the point. Here's the value of acceptance. When you realize, oh, right. Well, if that's how it is, then my responsibility to myself and my special people, wherever they are, is to get off of this boat. And I am going to the lifeboats. And that's why I say in a lot of my videos, get yourself to the lifeboats. Because that's where I've been for a couple of years now. I've been talking about that a lot. Get to the lifeboats. Now, in the actual Titanic, we know what a lifeboat is. Simple enough. Go find one, put a bunch of people in it, get some food and water, blankets, whatever you think you're going to need out there on the frozen North Atlantic, and lower the lifeboat off the side of the ship. And there you are. You're floating away. That's getting to the lifeboat. Now, that's actually a very appropriate metaphor, because what is a lifeboat? It's a small boat. It's not as big as the Titanic, but it's kind of doing the same set of things, but it's small. And it's manageable. And of course, in the case of your lifeboat, hopefully it doesn't have a hole in it. It's not sinking. So let's assume the lifeboat does not have a hole in it like the Titanic does. It does not share that attribute of the Titanic, but it is a boat otherwise, and it will keep you out of the water, and you can hopefully be rescued, or you can save yourself, right? What if there's a motor, or there's oars or sails or something? Maybe you could sail to a safe place, right? You could do that. You could row yourself to a safe place. I mean, that's the theory. You're in the boat. You're not sinking anymore. You can maybe figure it out from there. And the same thing applies to our predicament right now with global heating. And let me explain that to you. The equivalent of the Titanic that has hit an iceberg and is sinking is global industrialized civilization. Global industrialized civilization has hit the iceberg. And like the people on the Titanic, we kind of don't know what the extent of the damage is. Really? We've never done this before, right? Have you ever collapsed a civilization before? No, you haven't. I certainly haven't. It's not a bad idea, by the way, to go do some sleuthing in the history books and find other civilizations that have collapsed. And there's some interesting stories there. Unfortunately, of course, a lot of the time when a civilization collapses, how does it work out? That's exactly the point where they stop recording what they're doing. I wonder why that is. Could be because they're all too busy getting to the lifeboats, right? So a lot of the time there's a sort of fog about how civilizations collapse. I've never really seen a definitive explanation of how the Roman Empire collapsed. There's all these different theories, and people do an entire lifetime career on just studying how the Roman Empire collapsed. And well, there's good reason to do that, because it'd be nice to know what that was like, how that happened. Our own civilization is, I would say, 100 times bigger than the Roman Empire. I'm not talking about territory, of course, because there isn't. We've been reconquering the same territory over and over again. But by 100 times, I mean there's many, many more people involved in global industrialized civilization than were ever involved in the Roman Empire. There's the technology that we are reliant on now is just layered deep and deep and deep and deep. It's so deep that most people can't even see how deeply embedded in technology they are. There are financial systems that are all intertwined and interrelated that just span the globe. There's money, trillions of dollars a second, moving all across the planet. No joke. Trillions of dollars a second. And there's treaties, and there are sovereign states, and there are criminal states, and all these things. And then, of course, there's all these goods, right? There, oil, the lifeblood of globalized industrialized civilization, and natural gas and coal, of course, play a role. And then there's movement of goods, all these cars and all this food and clothing and materials. We've been getting a little bit of a flavor for that because of all the problems in the Red Sea with the Houthi rebels firing missiles at ships passing by in the Red Sea. And it's a big deal. I don't know if you've been following this or not, but companies are reporting supply chain problems because they can't get their goods on time, or they can't get them at all. Some of these ships, get lost or turn around and go home. And whether or not the U.S. Navy should be out there stopping the Houthis and protecting the sea lanes and all this kind of stuff. And you start to realize how dependent we really are on this thing. And most people didn't even know that there was a Red Sea shipping route. Most people didn't even know that there was a Suez Canal through which all this shipping has to go. And then it's managed like a Taylor Swift concert. It's people queuing up and the ships going in and out. And some ships have to pay $500,000 per transit just to get through the Suez Canal. Oh, and the Egyptians, a quarter of their economy is from money from the Suez Canal. So this is all globalized, industrialized civilization, right? And as I've said many times, it's the lights, it's the water, tap water, it's the sewer treatment when you flush your toilet, it's the food on the shelves at the Costco or the Trader Joe's, it's the food that on those shelves that came from all over the planet, Ecuador, right, the Philippines, South America, or even if in the United States, it's still 5,000 miles across the United States. So there's all this stuff that's being moved, and all these trucks that come in at 3 o'clock in the morning and disgorge their contents into the stores, and not just food. There's trucks on the freeways full of all kinds of stuff, complicated machines, iPhones, raw materials for making other things. Some of those raw materials are based on fossil fuels, right? Not all fossil fuels goes into transportation. It's a pretty small part. Fossil fuels goes into actual transportation. A lot of the fossil fuels goes into what? Fertilizers, paints, pharmaceuticals. It's a long list. And so our global industrialized civilization is dependent on all these things. And Rome had something like that going on, right? There's a reason why they were in Britain fighting the Celts and the Picts. They were there for the tin because they needed the tin to combine with the copper from Cyprus to make bronze, which they made their shields and spears and swords out of, bronze, right? And later on they made things out of iron, but for a long time, bronze was a very important alloy, and you needed different types of metals to make it. So it doubled your complication, doubled the places you had to go, doubled the miles you had to put on to get the raw ingredients to make bronze. Most people don't even know that. Most people don't even know there was a Bronze Age. Most people don't know that the Roman Empire was all over the place looking for tin and copper. And of course, they found the other things as well, right? They found the silks coming from the east, and they found the slaves coming from the west, and they brought their culture everywhere they went. It made a big difference. The world would be a different place right now without the Roman Empire, and yet it collapsed. How'd that happen? Nobody knows. Nobody wrote about it. In fact, the period right after or even during the fall of the Roman Empire is called the Dark Ages. Why? Because nobody knows. We don't know what happened. It's dark. Can't shed a light on it. No one wrote anything down. You can do some archaeology, and they've been doing a lot of that in England. It's fascinating. I love these things, these documentaries where they're digging up Roman settlements, and they say, well, here's the place where the Romans left, and look how things changed. There's the layers of all this Roman artifacts, and then it's gone. Okay, well, that's how it's going to be with us, because we have to stop burning fossil fuels. That's as simple as that. Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, you're in a wicked problem. Go look it up in the dictionary. Look up the words wicked problem, and you come back and tell me what you found, okay? We have to do this. It's the only solution. The other solutions have real problems, become problems in themselves. That's why we call it a wicked problem. So we're going to have to stop burning fossil fuels. Now, the problem for you, and the reason why you're doomed, is because we're all doomed. Because global industrialized civilization is doomed. That's the thing. The ship is sinking. We hit the iceberg, the water's coming in, all the data points at, we can't stop this ship from sinking. It's going to sink in the next 15 minutes or the next 5 hours. We really don't know, but it doesn't matter when. It's going down. So it doesn't matter if it's now or later or, whatever. We have to get to the lifeboats because that's what you do when your ship is sinking. And so with industrialized civilization sinking, that's my word to you. It's sinking. Can't you just sense the deck is tilting? And if it just keeps doing that, you know what happens? It sinks. Okay. So this ship, our current civilization, is going to go beneath the waves, whatever those are, and you need to get yourself to a lifeboat. And the lifeboat is an appropriate analogy because the equivalent of a lifeboat for civilization, which is a big thing with lots of people and many millions of services, the equivalent to the big thing that is sinking is a little thing that is not. And I've been calling that, in summary, village life. Villages can also sink, but it's the equivalent of a lifeboat. When I say get to the lifeboats, and I explain what that means, it means create where you can village life. These are little boats, little flotation things that you can put food into, that you can put services into, that you can put multiple people into, that where you can help each other. And maybe you float away from the disaster, or you row away, or you sail away with the wind, or whatever you do, but you're in a little version of the big thing with its billions of moving parts, and its billions of people, and its billions of contracts, and its billions of dollars moving across the planet every second. There's a tiny thing that tries to reflect some of that, and it's called a village. Villages can be pretty big. You can have 500 people living in a village, right? And at some point it becomes a town, but let's start small, shall we? In fact, really small is a hamlet. It's like 100 people living in a hamlet. So start with hamlets, then we become villages, then we become towns, but we have to start with lifeboats. Okay? Now here's why this is important. This is not an optional thing. You have to get to the lifeboats. You have to figure this out. If you don't figure this out, then you're doomed. You are doomed. And my default thinking at this point is that, oh yeah, we're not going to figure this out. We're just not. We've been sailing on this Titanic for so long that our survival instincts are paralyzed. We just don't know we can't even think. We've been sailing on the Titanic for so long that we can't even imagine getting to the lifeboats. I can't do anything but sail on this Titanic. I can't do anything except belly up to the bar and the dessert cart and the filet mignon and the dance hall and the gambling casino. All I can do is all these things I can't even imagine. By my brain, I can't even unhinge my brain from all these things. I have to have these things. Lifeboats? Do I have a casino on the lifeboat? No? Oh, well, then I can't do that. Is there a dessert cart on the lifeboat? There isn't? Well, then I can't go there. And that's the state we're in. And the problem with this is that you, me, all of us, individually and collectively, can't survive without the big thing, the globalized industrial civilization. We can't survive without it. That's our habitat now. It didn't used to be that way. Elephants don't have those kind of problems. Wolf packs don't have those kind of problems. Stray cats in your own neighborhood don't have that kind of problem. They are optimally self-sufficient, and they can figure it out. You can't. I can't. I know I can't. So that puts me a little bit above the people who don't know that they can't figure it out. Because this is harder than you imagine. This is really hard. I always bring this up, how hard this is. Your habitat, we are called Homo sapiens, the wise one, okay? But what you really are is you're not Homo sapiens. You're Homo economicus. You're Homo technicalicus, right? You need technology. You need money. You need economics. You need all this gearing, all this civilizational stuff, because you can't survive without it. That's your habitat. A butterfly needs nectar. A hawk needs rodents. An elephant needs grass. Shark needs whatever sharks eat. barrels of nails, from what I've heard. But everything needs its thing. That's called its Umwelt, its world, the world that it lives in. And a butterfly has a different Umwelt, a different world than a hawk, even though the butterfly flying around in the meadow looking for nectar is in the same space, the same coordinate system as a hawk sitting in a tree right above the butterfly. They're in the same space, but they see that space completely differently. The hawk has no interest in the flowers, doesn't know what they're for, doesn't know why they're there, can't even see them. Its brain is completely geared to something else. And it's seeing that rodent moving around in the bushes, and the butterfly can't see the rodent. The butterfly just flies over the same bushes looking for the nectar. And the hawk and the butterfly they're both creatures that can fly. They're both flying over the same meadow. They're both seeing the same meadow through different kinds of eyes. And they live in completely different worlds. They're not even connected. And you and me and all of us really are Homo technicalicus. We are embedded, our Umwelt, our entire world, our entire visual comprehension of everything is technology. That's how we survive. The technology that brings the food to the store, the technology that brings the electricity to my house, the technology that caused these fibers to be created, this polyester from plastics, from oil, crude oil. Right, I'm wearing crude oil right now, and but this shirt wasn't even made in my community. This shirt was made in Indonesia. I got to check the tag; it'll say made in Indonesia, made in Pakistan, right? And then there was technology for weaving and making cloth and patterns to make the clothing and sew the buttons on, and all these machines. You think that there's really some little Pakistani person sitting there with scissors and needle and thread making this shirt? No, it's all done with machines. Huge, expensive machines, factories full of machines making shirts. And then that shirt goes onto another machine that transports it to a port, which is also a machine. Try to do anything without a port. There's cranes and there's containers and there's ships sitting there, and there's electricity to the ships and electricity to the cranes, and these people that come and go 40, 50 miles a day in transportation just to be able to operate the cranes and move the containers and put the shirts on the ship. And then the ship goes across the sea, and there's GPS guidance systems, and there's huge motors in these things. And the motors, of course, run on fossil fuels. And then they go to yet another port, and there's more crane operators, and there's more managing the containers. And the containers have barcodes on them, and they scan the barcode, and they know which way that container goes. And they put the container on a truck, and they give the truck the destination. The truck driver, who, of course, drove to the port in his car so he could drive a truck all day, he drives his truck and he goes to some city, and that city has a distribution center. And that distribution center, that factory, is full of computers and full of shelves and full of routing, forklifts, and all this stuff. And he disgorges his contents into the center, and more trucks pull up that are for individual vendors. There's a truck that pulls out for Target, and there's a truck that pulls up for J.C. Penney, if they even exist anymore. And there's a truck that pulls up for Walmart. And there's a truck that pulls up for somebody else. And then those trucks fill up with all the shirts. And the shirts then go 80 different directions. And those trucks are going through intersections with traffic signals and the highway patrol, keeping the lane safe, and all this asphalt running all these different directions. And then the truck delivers it finally to a store someplace, and it goes into the store, and it's scanned again, and it goes up on the shelf, and it gets entered in the computer, and then you pull it off the shelf, and they scan it at the computer at the checkout, and they do some work on that computer, and then you swipe your credit card, and the credit card gets credited, and you get a bill a month later. And finally, after all of that bullshit, after all of that technology worked for you, it's absolute, incredible, unimaginable magic. And everything I just spewed was maybe 1/100th of the fact of the matter. Then you get your shirt. And that's just clothing. That's just clothing. That is not food. That is not shelter. That is not security. That's just one shirt. That's a fucking shirt. Homo technicalicus. You are embedded in technology. That's all you see. That's all you know. That gives you your food. Technology gives you your clothing. Technology gives you your services. Technology gives you your security. Everything, 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 everything under the sun for humans is technology. Everything, everything, everything. 24/7, 100% of everything you eat, wear, drink, touch, see, talk about, know about, every thought you've ever had came to you through some complicated stream of technology. Everything, 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 every fucking thing. Technology. You are Homo technologicus. Your Umwelt, your habitat is technology. You live, that's your water. You are the fish that swims through technology. You breathe it, you excrete it, you eat it. It surrounds you, you surround it. It's inside you, it's outside you. And all of that, all of it, 100% of it is made possible and enabled and continues with 100% constant consumption of fossil fuels. Every single thing, everything, everything, everything. And the problem for you is that the globe is heating. The planet is heating. It's going to get bad. It's going to get really bad. People are afraid. People who are in this business, who study the data, who understand where this is going, who draw the charts, who talk about the papers, who present the presentations, people like me are afraid. We're afraid. And one of the things that we're afraid of, once we finally step back a little bit from the actual work and we say, okay, I accept that this is the truth. I'm now in acceptance. Okay, fine. Then your next thought is, well, what does it mean? Well, it means we have to stop burning fossil fuels. Oh, okay, fine. And then you're, oh shit. What do you mean we have to stop burning fossil fuels? Yeah, that's it. That's the only way you stop the planet from getting too hot to live on. We can't stop burning fossil fuels. Well, we're going to have to, but we can't. Well, too bad. Well, don't you know what's going to happen when we start burning fossil? Yeah, I know exactly what's going to happen. And you're still saying that? Yes, I'm still saying that because we have to do it. And what we all know, what we've all had to accept, when our souls are at the darkest depths of despair and the acceptance is grinding at us like gears, daring us to look away, what we know, what is looming ahead next week, next month, next year, sometime, don't even know when, but what's looming, what's coming, is a lot of people are going to perish. They're just not going to make it. How many people? Well, that's actually that's the easiest part. I can tell you that right now. 99%. In other videos, I've derived that number. It's actually very simple. It's really simple to derive an actual number, 99%, with high confidence. How can you know that? The numbers don't lie, and the numbers are based on physics and a little bit of history. So you combine, again, collecting data here, okay? You combine a little bit of human history with a little understanding of physics, with a little understanding of our current predicament, and the only thing that really comes even close to ending that predicament. And then you say, oh, okay, so that's it. You just put those dots and you connect them, and there's an arrow and it's pointing right at, we're doomed. We're basically fucked at this point. Our Titanic has hit the iceberg and the deck is tilting and the water's coming in, and I've done the math and so this thing is sinking. Okay, I get it. This thing is sinking. Thank you very much. Good luck. I'll just be heading for the lifeboats. Excuse me. That's the point I'm at. I don't need to hear any more. And I know there's not going to be any miracles. I just know because physics. And the only thing we can do, and we will either do it or it will be done unto us, is to stop burning fossil fuels. Okay. Got it. That's bad. Yeah, it is. Yeah. You know how bad it is? I guess I know exactly how bad it is. I mean, I maybe even underestimating how bad it is. You know, I don't want to really face it. So I do a quick calculation and it's like, oh, well, God damn it. That is pretty bad. 99% die off. Okay. How do I get that? It's really simple. A 90% die off using round figures. There's 8,000 million people currently on Earth, all over the Earth, everywhere. A 90% die off leaves 800 million people. That's a lot of people. Okay. About the time that humans entered this process funnel of becoming industrialized and becoming global, okay, there was probably a little less than 800 million people on Earth. 10% of the current population, a little less than that. But the Earth was largely unexplored in the year 1600, 1700. There was lots of room to expand. It was fairly pristine. We hadn't even dug up the fossil fuels yet. We had all that energy in our future to do things with. And we hadn't destroyed the Earth dynamic system, and it hadn't caught on fire, and we hadn't done all these terrible things. And we didn't have nuclear weapons, and we didn't have mechanized warfare, and we didn't have, toxic chemicals every place. And we were not even 800 million people on Earth. So maybe the Earth in its current incarnation can support 1/10 of that. 1/10 of that. It's full. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to plant the trees to save yourself? Where are you going to plant the food when you stop burning fossil fuels, and you stop using fossil fuels for fertilizer, and you stop using fossil fuels for pesticides, and you stop using fossil fuels for transportation of food, and you stop using fossil fuels for processing of food, and you stop using fossil fuels for delivering food to stores and refrigerating it. When you stop using fossil fuels for all of this, the amount of food you can actually develop without modern agriculture, because that's what all that was, right? But the amount of food you can produce without all that modern agriculture is probably 1/10 of what you're producing now. Because how are you going to produce it without fossil fuels? You're not going to drag, a 40-foot plow behind a John Deere tractor unless you've electrified it somehow. We don't even have those yet. I don't believe I could figure out how to do it. I'm an engineer, but no one's asked me to, because they just want to burn the diesel. So we're just going to keep burning diesel until we can't. And then what are we going to do? Well, then you're going to be out there in the fields with an ox that eats grass. You're going to be out there with an ox and a plow of some kind, and you're going to be digging a furrow, and some other person's going to be coming behind you and spreading the seeds. And then you're all going to go out there together. And you're going to harvest the wheat and the corn and the barley and the rice and the everything else. And how much food can you produce that way compared to one guy in a John Deere tractor? Well, 1/10. So if that's your budget, okay, then now we're down to 80 million people. 80 million people in the entire world. And that's, by the way, that's 1%. That's 1%. The math is easy. The math is easy. The math does itself. The math solves itself. 1%. Wow. So that's it. So we're doomed. Another way to look at that is, as our technological ship sinks due to a combination of harms from global heating, making things increasingly difficult, climate change, making things increasingly difficult, all the disruptions from those disruptions, so refugee crises and military adventures and supply chain disruptions and food insecurity, as it sinks under all of those harms, then we have to jump ship. And some of us, I would say, according to my estimates, 1% of us jump ship into lifeboats, which are smaller versions of this big thing that we call global industrialized civilization. And the lifeboats are going to be small groups of people who figure it out, right? They realize that the ship was sinking. They jump in the lifeboats, okay, so-called, which are probably better described as hamlets or small villages, and they start planting food, and they start circling their wagons, and they start, raising oxen to plow the fields with, and they start reintroducing technologies that are more appropriate to that scale of work, and they start giving up on fossil fuels, and they start providing their own electricity, and they start providing their own water, because they don't really expect these services to continue. It'd be nice if they did, but no one's talking about that, so let's just assume they don't. And they figure it out. They figure it out. They figure it out. Nobody today, nobody, not even me, really, if it comes down to it, is working on that work right now. Nobody. And yet, this ship is sinking. And as with the Titanic, it could go down slowly. It could take years, or it could go down next week. The global industrialized civilization is brittle. It is breaking, and it could break catastrophically at any time it needs to or wants to, or can't hold itself together anymore. And we could find all ourselves in this situation where the deck is essentially tilting by the day, and this thing is about to go underwater and take anybody with it who couldn't get off. And that getting off in the context of the Titanic was a lifeboat. And the getting off in the context of global industrialized civilization is a village, a small unit of organizing people around not partying and going to New York Harbor and going to the casino and meeting a lover and all these things. That's what the Titanic was about. That's what global industrialized civilization is about. What our little hamlet, our little village is about just surviving. It's a lifeboat. No, there's no casino and there's no dessert cart. And you're probably not going to make it to New York Harbor either. It's just going to keep you from slipping beneath the waves. That's all it's going to do. And for some people, that'll be enough. For some people who don't want to drown, so some people who don't want to get lost, for people who don't want to go over the Seneca Cliff, holding hands and singing Kumbaya, for those people who would rather not have that experience, there's a village. Now, those don't exist. Now, some parts of Europe, they probably still exist. You can probably go parts of Europe and find these isolated rural areas that still function pretty much like the way they did during medieval times, right? Could. They have you see it in the postcards. They have their fields still, and they have the hedges, the fences that define the fields, and there's still sheep grazing and cattle grazing. And some of these little places, they still milk the cows and produce the cheeses, and they brew the beers, and they have a Oktoberfest, and it's a big party, and they all know each other, and they've all lived there all their whole lives. And you can still find villages, functional, some mostly functional. Oh, and if you go into the barns of those old villages, right? You go into the barns, you'll find the plow and the harness and the butter churn, and you'll find the hay hooks and the scythe for mowing, and you find it in the sickles for harvesting the wheat. You find it all there. It's just hanging up. It's rusting, it's dusty, but it's there. You see, it's a kind of a memory. It's a sort of institutional memory, a collective communal memory. But you're not going to find these things in a modern US or European suburb. You're not going to find these things because these things never had that experience. The villages, in Bavaria and Germany, they remember. It wasn't that long ago. For some of them, it was 100 years ago that they stopped doing these things. Some of them maybe never stopped, ever. Never stopped. Because they're going to have a slightly easier time than the rest of us. But the task remains for them and for us to figure this out. We have to make these lifeboats. You are Homo technicologous. You are technical. You are in bed. That's your Umwelt. That's your entire worldview is technology. Everything. I just went through it with this shirt. Do I have to do this again? I'm not going to do this again. You are embedded in technology. The technology requires constant 24/7 inputs of fossil fuels. There's no question that this is the case. You never think about this. No one ever thinks about this. This is not a conversation. It was never a sitcom on CBS. It never happened. No one ever talked about it, and yet it was real. And just because you don't recognize it doesn't make it real. And just because you're not thinking about it doesn't make it real. And just because you don't care about it or think it's forever or think it's eternal doesn't make it real. And because it's real, it can go away. Because it's real, it can stop. And your technological world is based 24/7, every single day. Every day that you've been alive, and every day that your parents have been alive, and every day that your grandparents have been alive, probably, has been based on consumption of fossil fuels. Simple as that. That's your world, consumption of fossil fuel. It's my world, that's our world. And that world is sinking because of excess carbon emissions. We can't fix that. The only way we can stop that, meaning we stop making it worse, the only way we stop making it worse is to just not burn the fossil fuels. And if we choose to do that, well, good for us. We made a move. We chose. But let's say we don't, because of course we won't. We won't do that. We won't choose. Everyone in this field who has accepted the reality and has taken off the rose-colored glasses, and everyone in this field, climate science in general, who has come to the point of acceptance. Okay, I get it. I accept it. Which is not many, but every day it's more. Every day it's more people have got to the point of accepting. They're all now aware that this thing is going down. And the way that is generally expressed is we're doomed. We're doomed, and I'm not going to explain it. And I just did. I just explained it. I explained why you're doomed. Because your habitat's going away. The thing that keeps you alive, the water that you swim in, that you breathe and feed from, that protects you and moves you along, it's going away. You're about to be a fish out of water. You're doomed. Well, I'm not doomed if we don't stop burning fossil fuels. True enough. But if you don't stop burning fossil fuels, then the planetary system will get more and more broke, faster and faster. The cracks will get wider, the pieces will fall off, and then it will just collapse for its own internal reasons. There will be places that get so hot that no one can go out and work. They can't. You can't deliver food. The food spoils in the trailer. It spoils in the store. And the infrastructure can start to fall apart. The oil wells themselves might catch fire and seize up and stop working. The gas fields themselves may stop working. There may be so many problems with electricity distribution because of the heat. That's a thing. Heat interferes with electricity distribution. Yes. The challenges of electricity distribution to the oil fields, the gas fields, and the coal mines could become so severe that they simply can't operate. So you didn't choose not to burn fossil fuels, and then one day it just stopped happening. And you had nothing to do with it. You're like, oh, well, that was unexpected. Why was it unexpected? Because I didn't want it to happen. Well, too bad. You didn't have any control. You had a lot less authority than you thought you did. So we can choose to shut this down and try to put as many people as we can into lifeboats, villages, right? Make them as autonomous and resilient as possible. Whatever they need. What do you need? Plows, oxen? Can we fix that? Do we keep state farms where they use the last of the fossil fuels that actually can be burned? Do we allow for to grow the crops and then distribute those to the villages? Is that where we're going to do it? Or are we just going to have a party, sing a song, get drunk, gamble, and the deck is tilting, and all of a sudden it goes below the waves and takes us with it, and problem solved, right? Problem solved. You didn't have to make any decisions. You didn't have to decide to get the lifeboats. You didn't have to hear any bad news. You didn't have to see anything you didn't want to see. And you didn't let anyone talk to you and say something you didn't want to hear. And you just partied on and drinking and gambling and schmoozing and fucking and whatever else you're going to do. And then it just goes beneath the waves. Hey, that's an option. That is absolutely 100% an option. You could definitely do it that way. Absolutely. My guess would be for most people, that's exactly how we're going to do it. because the alternative is just too dismal. Okay, fine. Well, we're doomed either way. We, the 99%, whoever signed up for that duty, are doomed. When? I don't know. When? Since I don't know and no one else really knows, next week, I guess. I mean, you can't assume it's 200 years from now. You can't assume it's 2 years from now. You just have to say, okay, well, we're doomed. And, probably in my lifetime, probably soon-ish. But yeah, sure, why not next week? There's enough crap going on in the world right now. Enough supply chains are being disrupted, food insecurities, different places in the world, refugees showing up at the borders, right? There's enough of that going on. Who knows when that tips over into a global collapse? Everything you're seeing in the news, everything you're hearing about right-wing, hate groups, and everything you're learning about how things are becoming unsettled is the deck tilting. It's the deck tilting. Okay, we're taking on water, and it's not working. We can't fix it, and the deck is tilting. And so, at some point, the thing just slips beneath the waves, takes everybody with it. 99%, I suspect. Could be more. Who says 80 million people come through this on the other side? Who says? Who says? Who says? That's just a guess. I mean, it's not a bad guess. I've got numbers to back it up. Through most of human history, we were bouncing around between 200 and 300 million people. And then population started to increase. But that's also when the harm to the planet started to increase. And pretty soon we were running out of forests. And pretty soon we were, one country was invading another country and taking their food. And pretty soon, we discovered fossil fuels, and then things really took off. But we were having trouble for a long time. So who's to say? Who's to say that 800 million is the number? Who's to say that 80 million is the number? What if it's 8 million? Wow, that's 1/10 of 1% survival rate. Not extinction, by the way. That is not extinction. 8 million humans. Are there 8 million elephants? Are there 8 million zebras? Are there 8 million of anything other than insects? Yeah, we could end up with 8 million humans. How many villages is that? A couple thousand villages? Probably. So maybe we end up with a couple of thousand villages, scattered across the planet. People who just accidentally got together and figured it out, who just happened to be in the right place, who just happened to not be in the way of the armies of refugees looking for food and clothing and shelter. Just happened to get lucky. They were on the edge all along anyway, and the whole ship sank, but they were on the edge, so it didn't take them down. They got lucky. Their little village somewhere in the Badlands of Montana, they just kind of squeaked through. And when they get on the phone and they call people in New York City, no one picks up the line. And when they get on the phone and they call their family in Florida, no one picks up the line. And when they get on the phone, there's no dial tone. There's no cell phone connection. And when they get on the internet, there's no internet connection. There's nothing. Everything is 404. But here they are. They survived. What happened? I don't know. Just overnight. Somehow overnight, it just all went down. The whole thing sank. Just like the ship going beneath the waves. It just vanished. Wow. Like waking up from a dream, right? It just vanished. It could vanish. Wow. Global heating, people. It's worse than you know. It's going to interrupt your access to technology, and technology is the water in which you swim. What happens then? Well, I guess we're going to find out, won't we? I'll be back here to talk about more of the same. I don't know what the topic will be. Right now I got bigger fish to fry, okay?